I made a game in 7 days, where you play as a healer and must keep your MMO party alive. Hello everyone! I was recently invited to take part in Helper Wesley's Fireside Gamejam. I wasn't planning on doing any more jams for a while, but it would have felt rude to say no. So, here we are. The jam was 9 days long, but as is often the case, I lost 2 days to other responsibilities, but 7 days was plenty. Anyway, the theme for this jam was Rejuvenation, and I struggled for a while to come up with an idea. At first I was thinking of starting with a dead village, and you would have to find the spirits of the townsfolk who would help you progress as you revived them. Stuff like finding the lumberjack would open up the map by removing a tree blocking your path, for a sort of Metroidvania style progression. But I couldn't figure out what the actual gameplay was going to consist of, and while I do respect walking sims and similar exploration-based games, that sort of things just doesn't play to my strengths as a developer, so I needed my interpretation of the theme to be a game mechanic that I could focus on. Eventually, I settled on the idea where you played as a healer in an MMO party who must keep his teammates alive, without doing any of the actual fighting themselves. I have always had a fascination with games where a large part of the game plays itself, with players just being one cog in a greater whole. And this felt like a good way to do that. Your party is going to fight with or without you. You can play your part and keep them alive, but your teammates are just as important as you are. So, with that, I got to work. Day 1 was spent getting the fighting system in place without the player. This meant mostly writing the AE character script with all the AI, and a character manager that handled communication between the characters. I gave characters a few stats, including max health, move speed, attack damage, speed and range, etc., and wrote a few AI states. A character could be idle, chasing, attacking, or fleeing. When idle, they would pick a target to attack, more on that later. Then chase. When chasing, they would simply move towards their target and check if they have reached attack range, and once in range, they attacked, doing damage based on their attack power and speed. When their health reaches a certain threshold, they flee, which makes them either run away from their target, or if they have a healer in their group, run towards the healer. Each character has what is called a target type, which contains 3 booleans that determine their targeting behavior: targets most health, targets nearest, and prioritize health. If prioritize health is on, then the first thing a character will look at when picking a target is their health. If most health is true, then they look for the tankiest foe, otherwise the weakest. If multiple foes have the same amount of health, then depending on target nearest, they either go for the closest one or the furthest. If prioritize health is off, then they simply go for the nearest or furthest, disregarding the health check entirely. And with just these 3 booleans, enemies and friendlies alike can have very different targeting behavior. I did later add an extra boolean to the character called focus target until kill, which, if true, the character will focus their target until kill. Otherwise, they'll change as soon as something else meets their criteria. Characters have an integer variable called faction, with an array for friendly factions. It was going to allow for friendly NPCs not in the player party, or having enemies that fought the player party as well as each other, but in the end I only went with the 2 factions, players and enemies. So with this all in place, I could make a ranger type character by upping their attack range and making them target further away enemies with low health, a tank by upping their health and making sure they attacked whoever was nearest to them, as well as various enemies and a warrior. So by end of day 1, I had a full party of heroes, save for the healer, able to take on a horde of monsters. My goal for day 2 was to add the player to the game. Now, if I wanted to write good code, I'd have made a parent class for NPC and player to inherit from, as they share a lot of similar code. But I was lazy and just copy-pasted the character script and removed everything related to AI, replaced it with player controls for movement and manually targeting friendlies, and then I coded the spells. So, a spell consists of multiple variables that determine their behavior, starting with a cooldown, their range, and the amount they heal. There is also a boolean on whether the healing from this spell can revive a dead character. So with this, I could make the first 3 spells. A close range heal spell called Healing Hands, a long range but weaker heal spell called Healing Bolts, and the Resurrect spell. I eventually added a boolean for heal over time, and the stats for how much a spell can heal every tick and how long said tick was, to allow for a health regen spell. And finally, I added the target all boolean, which would override the player's target and just heal all allies instead. And this script covers every heal spell in the game. I then worked on the heads up display, which needed a section to show a portrait for every member of the party and their health, and a section that showed the status of all players' spells, including whether they were cooling down and if they were in range of the selected target. Health bars are really simple. I added a red and green rectangle over the character, and had the green one's X scale down based on how much health they had compared to their max. I used the same technique for the health bars by the portraits and the cooldown for spells, only it was the Y scale in these cases. I had big plans for storytelling and having multiple different levels, but decided to de-scope this before proceeding with any of it. I definitely would not have been able to implement it in time. Instead, I went with a wave survival mode, which involved reusing a lot of my code from Return to Sender's wave manager and spawn points. So I did that, and pretty much had all the gameplay down. I took a day off any technical dev work to just work on sound effects and healing spell particles, which was a hell of a lot of fun. I want to make a separate video on how I made each sound effect. I think that would be a fun watch, but all sound effects were made using my microphone and household objects, and a fair bit of filtering and layering in Audacity. The magic spells, for example, were all made using my son's piano toy, and a heavy dose of pulse stretch. But like I said, that's another video entirely, so I'll leave it there. At some point, I added a fail state when all friendlies die, and a win when the wave manager runs out of waves. So there was no more gameplay features left to add. I mean, I had plenty of ideas. I could have had a progression system that unlocked your spells over time or allowed you to upgrade your teammates, but I wanted a few days where the game was mechanically complete and I could focus only on aesthetics and polish and gameplay testing. And then I added a new mechanic anyway! I needed a tutorial, and figured the best way to convey tutorial messages was to have the party members tell you how to play, like a group of friends teaching their new recruit how to play the game. So I needed a chat system. I made it so every character can have text appear over their head, which, thanks to lessons learned from developing Return to Sender, didn't take too long to implement, even though it still feels messy. Every wave can have a message which consists of a character name and the message itself, and at the start of that wave it would get every character to say their lines. So with this I could have the tutorial, and add a bit of flavor text between waves for extra, flavor. It was at this point I recruited Alen to draw up character graphics. It was the 4th day of development for me, but the 6th in the jam, meaning he only had 3 days to draw up all the characters, monsters, and some art for the menu, win and lose screens. And, well, he really delivered. The game went from placeholders to looking pretty damn good thanks to his efforts. Things were even worse for my musician, who I recruited with only 2 days to go, so the pressure was really on for Ben. But he delivered a great combat tune, which ensured I didn't have to use any public domain or royalty-free assets in the final game. So a heartfelt thank you to both Alen and Ben, and a huge apology for not asking you to get involved much sooner. On the final day, I just messed with the waves to try and find a decent difficulty curve. Fixed a few bugs some friends found and implemented the finished music. And then I clicked the submit button. At the time of upload, the rating period is still going, so I have no idea how we're going to do, but making the game was fun, and I've come out of this with a game I'm really proud of. There are 16 other games submitted to the jam, so I'm hoping to hit top 5, but there are some really polished and well put together games submitted, so we'll see. Wish me luck. In conclusion, I actually wasn't planning on joining this game jam, as I had just come off another side project, having made Hard Science, the RPG Maker asset pack I turned into a first-person shooter, but I was genuinely excited to be personally invited to the jam. It was very validating as a game developer on social media, so how could I say no? And I'm glad I did it, because I'm very happy with the resulting game. However, I do have some confidence issues I need to get over. I did not ask my friends to join the jam from the start because I have this constant fear that I'm going to hold others back and simply do not have the confidence to ask for a team up until I have something tangible to show them. This resulted in not giving my team members enough time to do their job, which, by the way, they still did an incredible job in spite of me. And also, they had little to no creative input. This was pretty much my game they hopped onto, and it really should have been our game. So, next time, I need to trust I'll get my part done and team up from day one, because I'm never going to make my own music and the art is absolutely not my thing. Anyway, the game is available to download or play in your browser, so be sure to give it a try. I really do need to get back to work on Return to Sender, so I won't be updating this post-jam straight away, but I do hope to come back to it. I feel like there's a great potential for a heartwarming story told through the chat system about the players themselves, not the characters, and I could certainly make a progression system in between quests. But even if I don't, I am happy with what's there, and I do encourage you to give it a play. As usual, thank you very much for watching. Feel free to check out my itch page to play any of my games, and please Wishlist Return to Sender on Steam. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!